Thank you for being here tonight. Before we get started, I just talked about some of the accessibility features, including the chat and live captioning. So before we get into the content, does anybody need assistance with that? Can everybody see me? Can everybody hear me? Let us know if you're having any issues. Maybe I can get a thumbs up if everybody's good. I see Christy gave a thumbs up. Yes. Lori, Arlene. Great. Marge, sort of. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Um, if you have any issues during the meeting with your sound or with understanding, accessing the chat, please let me know. If you have questions during the presentation, I ask that you hold on to them until the end or put them in the chat, and we will make sure that we address them once the presentation is over. So thank you for joining us. This is the third in our Alzheimer's education series presented by the Alzheimer's Association, Capitol Hill Village, and Cleveland and Woodley Park Village. So tonight we will be talking about what is ahead in terms of treatment and research for Alzheimer's. And we are joined by two representatives from the Alzheimer's Association. And I am going to ask Christy to please introduce herself and then pass it to Russ.
Hey, everybody. It's so good to have you here tonight and part of this educational program. I am the program manager at the Alzheimer's Association. We have an office here in Arlington, and I cover Northern Virginia and DC. So I'm really excited to see you guys all here and would love to see you guys at more programs. So if you guys like tonight, my information or Russ's information should be at the end of the presentation, and we'd love to hear more from you guys. Russ?
Well, thank you, Christy, and it's a pleasure to be here. Just for anyone who may not have been here for the first two meetings, Russell Michalov. I am a community educator associated with the Alzheimer's Association, the National Capital Area Chapter. So let's go on. First of all, to situate us for a discussion of what's ahead, and the research, let me do a very quick synopsis of things we've covered, in the first couple of weeks, excuse me. We first began by defining and describing Alzheimer's disease as a type of dementia, the most common form of dementia, but certainly not the only one. We discussed its prevalence to highlight the fact that it affects a huge number of people. Current estimates are about 7.4 million people with the disease in the United States, together with about close to $13 million people who provide unpaid support and care for them. We described the risk factors, both those that are and those that are not modifiable, and focused our attention in particular on those that are modifiable, because research has demonstrated that protecting your brain health can substantially reduce risk of Alzheimer's disease. We noted that Alzheimer's disease is a progressive disease and discussed its various stages. It's asymptomatic beginning. It will generally progress to a stage that we usually refer to as mild cognitive impairment, and then to dementia, which is sometimes differentiated as mild, medium, or mid, and late or severe. We talked about warning signs that are likely to appear at an early stage, that is to say, before it becomes dementia. And we talked about why. Well, we said number one, it's very often difficult to distinguish the warning signs from signs of normal aging. But it is important, to make that differentiation. And we talked about why at that early stage, noting and dealing with the warning signs is important. And we'll get in a little bit of that later as well. We talked about the process of diagnosing the disease and noted, some advances, some of it quite recent, which will make it a lot easier as time goes on. And lastly, we spent some time talking about treatments that are available. Okay, why don't we share the slides at this point? Let me, so that we can go on. Okay, let's go on to the next one. The first thing that we're going to be talking about and spending a good deal of time on is Alzheimer's disease. Again, this again is refreshing from last week, but I think this will help to situate our discussion, of what lies ahead. Alzheimer's was first described about 120 years ago by Dr. Alzheimer, who gave his name, to the disease. For close to a century after that, there were no treatments. It was only in 1996, the late 90s, that the first treatments were introduced, and those treatments treated the disease symptoms and behaviors. It improved life for those with the disease. It did not prevent the disease. It did not reduce the risks. It did not cure the disease, but it did, as I say, at least treat, some of the symptoms for those who have the disease. It was only in the last 6 years that any treatments have been designed, which are designed to treat the disease itself. They don't cure, they don't prevent, they don't cure, but they are designed to slow progression of the disease. That's an important advance, to be sure. But, and this, it points to where research needs to be going. There is currently no cure. There is no available treatment that prevents the disease or can reduce the risks of getting it. And even the recent treatments that are available, to slow the progression of the disease are expensive, they're inconvenient, and in some cases, there are non-trivial side effects. So that gives you basically, this is where we are now. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay. About over 20 million Americans, let me put it, residents of the United States are living with Alzheimer's disease or another dementia and are receiving unpaid care. The breakdown of that 20 million is about 7.5 million currently with the disease and probably 12.5 to 13 million unpaid care providers. 1 in 9 persons age 65 and older has Alzheimer's disease. That increases over age, incidentally, and by 85, it's closer to 1 in 3. 1 in 3 older adults, and this applies to the US, dies with Alzheimer's or another dementia. The lifetime risk, let me correct this item here. I should say the lifetime risk at age 45, age 45 is for women, 1 in 5, for men, 1 in 10. These numbers are expected to increase, barring the development of medical breakthroughs to prevent or cure the disease. By 2060, in that eventuality, the number of people with the disease may almost double. Currently 7.5, projected to increase to about 13.8. Okay, let's go on. So, what are the objectives? Well, I think they follow from where we are. There is no prevention. There is work going on. Early detection, yes, there is some early detection. As I mentioned, it is possible at the stage of mild cognitive impairment to differentiate the warning signs, although it's not easy. More work needs to be done because early detection is important for a number of reasons, and we'll talk about them. Reducing risk factors, maintaining brain health. We know a good deal. There's more to be known. There is work going on, and I'll talk a little bit about it. Better intervention is interventions. As we mentioned, the two disease slowing, Alzheimer's disease slowing interventions introduced in the 2020s. I'll name them. They're Kisunla and Leqembi. They are both, you know, the process of using them is intravenous, repeated intravenous, you know, and then, you know, it's slow. It slows the progression, but the process of using the interventions is inconvenient, it's expensive, and there are side effects, although they are usually manageable. So there's work going on to make those easier. And there's work to introduce other interventions. And lastly, of course, we're looking to can you reverse the course? So far, it hasn't been done, but there is work going on looking to that possibility. Let's go on. It's a lot going on now. Trials in progress now. There are 158 drugs and 192 trials underway. Most, meaning in this case about 3/4, are designed to evaluate therapies to slow the disease progression. Blood testing, or more accurately, detecting Alzheimer's pathology earlier, years before the onset of symptoms. Let me stop at this point and talk a little bit about blood testing. The first blood test to aid in the diagnosis of Alzheimer's was cleared by the Federal Drug Administration just last year. It works well, as demonstrated by pretty good concordance with the results from the blood tests with other Alzheimer's disease diagnosis processes. The two I have in mind are basically spinal taps and amyloid PET scans. However, with the blood tests that are the blood test that is currently approved, there is about a 20% chance that there will be an indeterminate determination. so that either a spinal tap or an amyloid PET scan would be necessary to make a definitive diagnosis. Work is needed and is underway to make the blood test, this blood test and others, better in that sense. And they are underway. The importance of, I'd like to highlight the importance of blood testing. It's important because it enables an easy, inexpensive way of accessing a diagnosis. It needs, as they say, some more work to make it definitive. Unlike a spinal tap, it's not invasive. I've never had a spinal tap. I know a few people that had. Nobody recommends it. It's apparently unpleasant. PET scans are not invasive. They are, however, bloody expensive, and insurance may or may not pay for it. So, blood testing, as I say, is easy. It's inexpensive. It can be done, in a primary care setting. And it certainly, therefore, is improvement, a big improvement, because it enables early diagnosis and enables people to begin thinking about and choosing whether they want to go ahead with the interventions to slow progression. And with better, better treatments, it will make possible better treatments again, at an early age. Okay, so this is pretty important. Work is all ongoing now on oral anti-amyloid therapies. The two therapies that we've talked about that are now on the market, Kisunla and Leqembi, are both both require periodic infusions. One is 2 weeks and every 2 weeks, and one is every 4 weeks, and I don't remember which is which. But for a person, that doesn't matter. They are periodic infusions. Work is undergoing to make the therapy available in pill form, which has, the benefits similar in some respects to the benefits of blood testing at the stage of diagnosis. It makes it easier, much easier, less expensive, and enables people, I think will enable more people, to take advantage of what's available. But I imagine that a pill form of the anti-amyloid therapies will be available relatively soon. Let's go on. There's more in process. Identification, improvement, and lifestyle interventions to reduce risks of dementia. We talked last week or the week before, I don't remember which, about, a major piece of work that was done, here in the United States, the U.S. Pointer study. And I'll describe it very, very quickly and briefly. Basically, two groups of older adults without dementia were enlisted to participate in the study. Both groups followed exactly the same brain health recipe, which focused on a physical exercise regimen, cognitive exercises, basically computer-based brain training exercises, nutrition. They were prescribed the Mind diet, which emphasizes dark leaf greens, berries, nuts, whole grains, olive oil, fish, and limits sugar and unhealthy fats. Okay. The result was that for both groups benefited in the sense that it reduced their risks of dementia over time. The groups that received followed the interventions and received a good deal of support and therapy. When we talked about it the other day, I basically described it as, I don't know, I use the term nagging. Nagging helps. The other group was basically had the same recipe, but it was all self-directed. Both groups, as I say, did better than the general population, people not involved, but in similar circumstances in terms of age and risk. They both did better. The groups that got nagged, that got support, did better. But basically, I mention it here because we know that you can substantially modify your risks of the disease with certain adjustments in lifestyle. That is to say, without medical intervention. More work is going to need to be done to improve lifestyle interventions. There is work ongoing on a worldwide basis, and there's lots on that. Beyond the two anti-amyloid therapies, and let me describe that a little bit. Basically, what the Kisunla and Leqembi do is to reduce the beta amyloid in the brain, which is one of the hallmarks, one of the significant biomarkers for Alzheimer's disease. Tau is another protein in the brain. It sometimes forms tangles in the neurons, which basically destroy the neurons, which is basically what Alzheimer's disease does. There's work going on to look at disease therapies targeting the tau tangles. So that's underway. There is work underway looking at addressing brain cell inflammation, which is, thought in many cases, to result in Alzheimer's disease. Okay. There's other things going on as well. I'm going to talk about them only very briefly because they're not as far advanced and they're difficult. It's difficult to say if and when, they will progress. The things that I've talked about so far, we're pretty sure will progress. As a matter of fact, I think basically what I'm going to do is basically describe, tell you about that there's work going on reversing the disease. This is the first work going on, with the idea of curing the disease, reversing the disease. Gene therapy. Gene therapy may be better described not as a therapy for cure, but as a therapy, for prevention. Stem cell therapy, repairing or replacing damaged brain cells. Work is ongoing. And that does, if and when that becomes proven and marketed, that will likely have some effect on actually reversing the disease. Okay. Okay, let's go on. I wanted to point out that the Alzheimer's Association has had a major role in the therapy and continues to have a major role, advocating for public policies that increase research, support for those affected by the disease, and a major funder. Currently, the Alzheimer's, as I say, has more than $490 million invested in over 1,220 active projects worldwide. It's the largest non-governmental source of financial resources for Alzheimer's research. And importantly, it provides a free clinical service basically to match to match research projects and find people, who meet criteria, for particular studies. For anyone here who might be interested, www.alz, that's Alzheimer's Association /trial match does exactly that. It's very extensive and matches down. It tells you some of the disease criteria. The criteria for involvement, in the trials. It tells you, what the stage of the trials are. It tells you who to contact, if you are interested. Okay, moving along. Okay, let's go to, and I think, Alex, you'll need to click here, somewhere, to activate these.
This is an incredibly exciting time in Alzheimer's and dementia research. The advancements that we've made in the last decade to understand the disease is a continuum, meaning that the biological changes are starting a decade or more before someone is experiencing the changes in the memory and thinking. This sets the stage for possible prevention. The idea that when we have the tools to identify those individuals at the earliest time point, and when we have the interventions to target individuals at that earliest time point, we can intervene to stop or slow the progression of the disease before an individual loses their memories.
Okay. Let's move on to the next.
Growing evidence indicates that people can reduce their risk of cognitive decline by adopting key lifestyle habits. More and more research shows that factors like exercise, nutrition, and aggressive management of cardiovascular risk factors may impact our ability to slow cognitive decline as we age. And through current studies, we're exploring how certain lifestyle factors may even reduce the risk of developing Alzheimer's and dementia.
Okay, let's go on.
This is an
Oh. There we go. Okay. The Alzheimer's Association, beyond their involvement in research, funding it, supporting the research, advocating for it, basically its other major function is supporting people with the disease, at risk for the disease, and those providing care partners for those with the disease. Let me go on and elaborate on that. That's good. Okay. The association has a 24/7 helpline. And yes, a live person does answer at any time you call, toll free. Offering confidential information support for people with the disease, for caregivers, for families, and for the general public. Now, I've called them on a number of occasions with a number of diverse questions. some trivial, some pretty significant, including doing a little research, for this program. Someone will answer. And yes, they will either have an answer for you or they'll make sure that you're connected and you get the answers you need. The association provides education and support, both for persons both in person and online, and helps to connect individuals with resources in the community. In this case, the community being the national capital area to which, Christy is on staff. And importantly, Alzheimer's Connected, which again is an association services which connects people with the disease, living with the disease, and caregivers with other caregivers. It's free, it's online, it can be found at alzconnected.org. And we all, I know I was for years involved, with the hearing loss community. One thing I certainly learned was we learned from each other. And I think this is true here. I've looked at Alzheimer's Connected, looked at what is offered. And yes, there's lots of things that people will talk about themselves, about others with whom they're working, and get advice, which is really quite good. Okay, moving on. Okay, I'm going to open it to questions. I've tried to talk, about the research in particular, and I'm being fairly selective for a couple of reasons. For one, there is research, which is an idea in somebody's mind. Whether it will materialize into something useful, who knows? Things that are very in early stages, some of it will materialize, some of it will not. And the other because, some of the research, frankly, and some of the language used in researching the research, if you will, is really research and using language designed to talk to other researchers. I like to think of myself as reasonable and reasonably intelligent, and I think the people here are likewise. But I doubt that anybody is a researcher, and I suspect that I don't want to get too much into the bushes and trying to decipher some of the research going on. I just wanted to point some of the things that are the important things that are going on. And if you have questions, by all means, now's the time to address them.
Thank you, Russ. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment so that we can take any questions.
I'll say something. It's actually not a question, but it's just a comment. But first, remind folks that you need to unmute if you want to ask a question. But um, I took care of my mother with Alzheimer's for 10 years in my home, and it was the hardest job I ever had, the most privileged I ever felt to be able to do so. But it was difficult, and I can't say enough good things about the Alzheimer's 24/7 hotline. I'm not too proud nor embarrassed to say that on occasion I did call them, sometimes in tears, when she would get night and day confused and she would be waking me up I had a baby monitor so I could listen for her, and she would wake me up, 7 or 8 times, and I would just be so, uh, you know, um, exhausted, like a new parent is with an infant. And just to have that phone call and have somebody on the other end of it at 2 in the morning offer that support, I just found very, very helpful. And it was also for me, it was a real emotional support. Even helping with, I have a big family. I have 6 sisters, and when you are the primary caregiver and you have a big family system, it's amazing. You haven't done a task together in maybe 50 years, and suddenly you're doing the most important task together and trying to figure out how to be siblings as well as care partners. It can be challenging. And even on those types of emotional issues, I found that hotline to be very helpful when I just needed to vent a little bit. So thank you for having that to the Alzheimer's Association. And please, if you are a care partner to somebody, reach out because it is the hardest job that at least I've ever experienced.
Yes.
Thank you for
Thank you,
sharing that,
Frank.
Frank. And
Thank you for
Christy put the helpline number in the chat. It's 800-272-3900. That's
yes.
800-272-3900.
I wanted to
Yes,
ask,
Janet, go ahead.
how commonly are is the blood test being used for diagnosis?
The blood test is, as I say, introduced quite recently. I don't think it is approved. I mean, it is cleared by the Federal Drug Administration in May of 2025. It is, I think it is generally regarded at this point as as useful, but not definitive. Typically, when it indicates that there may be a problem, it is generally suggested that the person get either a spinal tap or a PET scan, an amyloid PET scan of the brain, which is more definitive. Although I should say, so far in looking at that, and I'm sure the FDA looked at this when they cleared it, that yes, the concurrence between the results of the blood tests and the results of the spinal taps and PET scans was pretty close. So if the blood test suggests that yes, Alzheimer's is certainly a very distinct possibility, you probably would be advised to go on and get that confirmed with another test. And of the two, I would definitely recommend a PET scan. But it's getting better, and there's work to make the blood test better. The idea of let's try to get diagnosis early, and early diagnosis is important for a number of reasons. First of all, the two infusions, amyloid infusions that are on the market now, Kisunla and Leqembi, require a fairly early diagnosis. Early diagnosis is important. And a blood test, I think, is going to make that a lot easier to do, a lot more convenient, which will enable more people, to at least have the option of deciding what they want to do next.
So if the disease has already passed beyond early stages, is there any point in getting the blood test diagnosis?
Yeah. I mean, at this point, both Kisunla and Leqembi are designed, as I say, for people with mild cognitive impairment or early dementia. Now, you would need, I think, and you would certainly want to be talking to your doctor, and he may refer you to a specialist to determine whether you are a candidate for the disease slowing processes, whether they be as currently through infusions or later in pill form. But yeah, by the time, however, you get, I think, to the mid-range of dementia, it's not so obvious, that the slowing is likely to be effective for you. At some point in the future, as I indicated, there's work going on looking at disease reversal. It may be possible to do more at that stage. At the current stage, I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
Lori, go ahead.
Yeah. So I understand that if you already have a diagnosis, the disease has already progressed, there's probably no point in getting the blood test. My question is, since the blood test is so new, and I don't know who has an answer to this, maybe Christy does through the association. Do primary care doctors know about it? How does one access, if you know that it's available, do you say to your doctor, I want it, or is it going to be included in the usual batch of testing? So how widely aware do we even know is the medical community of these testings?
Community is aware of it. We actually have a conference that happens every year, and everybody's invited. All the clinicians are invited to come and learn about these kinds of things. So yes, it has been put out there. Once you come to your doctor and you say, I'm seeing these symptoms, most doctors at that point will say, okay, we've done all of these tests here in the office. Let's go ahead and confirm with a blood test. But it is one of those things that maybe your parent had dementia and you want to know that if you have the biomarker, you can absolutely go to your physician and ask for that lab work to be done.
Okay, thank you.
And is there a particular age, or does somebody need to be experiencing any symptoms? Could you do that at any point?
Do it at any point. You don't have to have symptoms. I think that most doctors, unless there is a genetic factor, might be a little more hesitant if you're not seeing symptoms. But we just spent about 2 weeks ago, a week on the Hill trying to make sure that insurances are going to be picking this up and paying in full for it. Not all insurance are currently covering the cost of this lab test. But anybody at any age can go and ask their physician for this.
Do we have any other questions from the group?
I guess I'll ask Christy a question if it's okay as a follow-up. So my mother, we presume she had Alzheimer's. She died when she was just shy of her 95th birthday, with, increasing symptoms over really a 10-year period. I'm turning 60 next month. Um, I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to I want the feeling that I have of, yes, I would love to go and tell my primary care doctor that I would like to get the test. And man, that's really scary.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. And there are people that don't want to know. And there are people who do want to know. Genetically, there's the possibility of it skipping somebody in the family. Just because a parent had it or a grandparent had it doesn't guarantee that you'll have it. But in my opinion, knowing allows you to make sure that you can set up all the paperwork, your powers of attorney, your finances, and all of those things before the disease progresses to a point where legally you can't make those decisions for yourself anymore, right? Knowing And I guess not knowing you can still do all of that, but it kind of gives you that peace of mind that you can let your family know what your wishes are, and how you want those carried out. And I think that's as why the association encourages people to do it, because so many times once you are having those symptoms and the brain is starting to shrink to the point where you can't, you're going to have a guardianship or a conservatorship, then somebody else is making those decisions for you. And I think that we don't always, we make decisions about what we think is best, for the person with the disease, whether it's cancer or dementia or anything. But that may not always be what their wishes are. So being able to speak to what you want and for your end of life, I think is always, it's more educational for the family.
I agree and agree entirely. And I think you're pointing out that beyond the decision of whether you want to go forward with disease slowing interventions, there are other reasons for early diagnosis. Planning for the care. You and your family planning for the care that you're going to need. Financial arrangements, updating wills, all of these things early. Some of the nicer care facilities have waiting lists. If there's a likelihood that you're going to need it, you may want to be on that waiting list. Who knows? On the other hand, getting to Frank's point about anxiety, I mean, I have to say, I would encourage people to be tested and be tested early for all these reasons. Some people, I think, will be resistant. Some people, I think, looking at, say, well, do I want a diagnosis? That's frightening. Am I better off? Do I personally prefer to just live with the anxiety in the back? Some people will probably elect not to be tested. I would encourage people to go the other way and to find out, because there's all kinds of reasons that we've talked about here. Thank you, Christy. For early diagnosis. But not all people will elect to go that way.
I'd like to say just one more thing. If you look at our website, it has 10 healthy habits, that you can do, when you have that early diagnosis, right? Or know that you have that biomarker. And they have said that by doing some of these habits, you can put off the disease up to 10 years. So as somebody who's 50 or 60, and knowing that you have the biomarker, but you don't have any symptoms yet, knowing that eating healthy and exercising and, taking care of your mental and physical health can put off dementia. I would think that, when we can prolong our life, we want to.
Marge, go ahead.
Questions. We all have dementia in the family now because we're here. Would you recommend your adult children or grandchildren, maybe 20 years old? Is the biomarker in existence at that point? That was one question, and then I'll go on with the next one in a minute.
Yes, they can get it as early as 20, and the biomarker would show up.
So that's a frightening thing to put on
It is.
people.
Yes.
Interesting. Because then they'll have to live with that fear.
I think that, it doesn't have to be fear. Education and the ability to make those choices, and set yourself up for success. It's It doesn't have to be fear. It can be, I can't think of the word I want, but just the knowledge of knowing what's coming and what you can do to put it off. It doesn't always have to be fearful.
The test would show, this is the amyloid, beta amyloid test, would show whether you have that marker, and then you can proceed and follow science and so forth.
Yeah, the beta amyloid, the PET scans would certainly make a fairly definitive determination, yes. And then the next step is basically you deciding, you talking to your physician, neurologist, whoever, about whether you want to, how you want to proceed, or if you want to proceed. There are, with the current infusions, yes, they slow progression. They're inconvenient. And yes, there are some side effects. Generally, they're manageable, but they can be serious. And you need to decide, look at, well, what does this mean for me? And am I a candidate? And even if I am a candidate, how do I wish to proceed?
And then my second question was, you had mentioned, it's been a while, so I'm getting forgetful, but if you have this and you want to make preparations and be on a waiting list at some of these better places, can you give us a list of the better places?
Oh, I'm not sure that I've done a whole lot of research on this. Um,
I will
And I'm
jump
sorry.
in here and say that that is a great question to ask your village. If you are a
yeah,
member of a village, we get questions like that all the time, and we're happy to make referrals, connect members to people who have already moved into those facilities, help people know what questions to ask. So if you are a member of a village, I would encourage you to talk to your village about that. They can probably give you a list.
Only thing I've heard
And
about, and it may be there, is they have referrals to like social workers who can then refer you further.
Well, I am a social worker with Capitol Hill Village, so I'll put my email in the chat and I will say that you are welcome to reach out to me about this.
Put it on so I can write it down.
Okay, my email is asmith@capitolhillvillage.org. And that's capital CAPITOL. asmith at capitolhillvillage.org. We get those questions all the time. Please email me. I'm happy to send you a list. There are other organizations like Iona that will also be able to provide similar information. So for things like that, I would turn to your senior service agencies for information and referrals.
And as someone, I was the power of attorney for my aunt with Alzheimer's, and she lived in memory care. And then with my mother lived with me. I would add to that a good conversation to have is whether or not memory care is something that one would wish, or as an alternative to be at home with a care partner with additive support. It doesn't, I guess I just want to make sure that the presumption isn't always that one has to go live in memory care. And by the way, memory care is one big term, but within memory care, there are very different models that I would hope that the villages, other providers in the senior network services can help one understand the different models that are there. Everything from a group home, which is, a smaller number of people, which we don't have in DC, but we have them in Maryland and Virginia, I believe, as well as more residential facilities, but have uh, different different theories on what is best. So sometimes you'll have a neighborhood they're building, where you're in a setting with only maybe 7 or 8 other people, and you're not in a group of 25 with 4 caregivers. You're in a smaller group. There's even a great new thing going on out of state, of course. I think it's in Wisconsin, where they're developing like basically a dementia-friendly village that is safe. But everyone there lives independently, but it's in a safe sort of compound where they can go to the grocery store, and people at the grocery store there know that they have dementia and may not be paying, but it's on their tab, and it's a very different model that comes out of Europe. So when you say memory care, you're looking at a vast array of different types of services that are available, and it's worth, in my opinion, working with a care manager or a social worker, or even sometimes there are consultants that work for private pay to help identify what might work best for you or your loved one. And it's a lot of work, but if you get a diagnosis early, or your loved one gets a diagnosis early, I think that to Russell's point, that's time that can be spent on these types of activities so that you can have you or your loved one in the place that best meets your needs. And that's really key because they're very, very different. Anyway,
Personally, we're planning in-home care as long as possible. But when it gets to be too much, then a place. And I have started exploring, but I don't have I have a couple of places I've seen and thought about, but I haven't determined the better ones, perhaps, in my mind. So I will work on that.
the last thing I will add is if you have some in mind and you're limited to a geographic area, I also strongly encourage you to go and visit and not just go on the tour, but then go back and see if you can sit and read a book for an hour or so and just observe and see if that's where that's the same type of place that you hear about when you went on the tour.
Thank you.
I believe sometimes they'll let you attend groups or meet with current residents, so it doesn't hurt to ask. Do we have any more questions? These are great. Well, if anyone thinks of anything later, I'm sure Russ and Christy would be happy to take your emails. So Christy's email is in the chat.
And
Uh,
I
and
don't,
Russ,
yeah, and I have no problem in providing my email. It just it's let me if you want to put it in the chat,
sure.
it's r Michalov 1 @gmail.com. But yes, further questions, any way I can be of any help, please don't hesitate.
And I
Um,
will add that we will be putting up all 3 of the recordings on our website as a blog, and then we'll provide the links to those recordings and the contact information to anyone that attended any of the 3 sessions. So we'll make those available to anyone that would like them.
well, thank you so much, everybody. I think we'll leave it there tonight then.
Well, just
Have,
let me just thank
oh, go ahead,
everyone
Russ.
for coming and thank the 2 villages, Cleveland and Woodley Park and Capitol Hill Village, for arranging this. I hope you found it useful.
Yes, thank you, Russ. Thank you for donating so much of your time and sharing all this vital information with us. I thought it was very
Yes.
useful.
Thank you.
Arlene, you have your hand up?
You're muted, Arlene. Maybe, Arlene, you could put it in the chat. We're not.
I meant to say, I meant to raise my thumb. My
Oh,
apologies. I'm so sorry.
that's okay.
I didn't aim well,
It'll
but
be
thank you.
it's like a high five now.
Yeah, this was very informative and very helpful. Gives
All
me
right.
food for thought. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.